I don't really train in Dynamo
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
Yeah.
I've got to the point now where I'm really comfortable with it. It's more Python and C Sharp these days.
Hi everyone! Look who's here today. OMG. I finally got the Aussie BIM Guru to do a video with me. So today we're going to be chatting about how did he get started on YouTube, what's next. We're both very busy at the moment planning for a very important event. He had the courtesy of announcing on his page that he would be taking a break because he's planning his wedding. I went the opposite way and I just kept going like everything is fine. But coincidentally, we found out that we're both planning for our wedding on the same day. So there's that. Today, we will be chatting about a lot of conversations that have already been happening on LinkedIn, least of all being what should you be learning beyond Dynamo. So thank you for coming, Gavin.
It's good to finally properly meet you, digitally at least, but face to face. Having, I think, first spoken about 5 years ago, and sort of seen your career journey, and you've probably seen mine. It's good to finally have some time to step to the side off LinkedIn and actually talk face to face. So, thanks for having me on board, and look forward to talking about all things BIM and digital.
I remember when we all sort of started visual scripting. Now everyone's doing it, but at that time, you had to convince your employer that what you were doing was worthwhile. No one knew what Dynamo was, and you had to sort of either do it on your own personal time. Inadvertently, the YouTube community for BIM has shown people that we're just not sitting around our computers all
Oh yeah,
day. Because
we're
that
doing
was
hard work.
actually, yeah, that was, I'm sure you had the same issue at the beginning. It's like, what are you actually doing?
It looks crazy, right? Visual programming looks so strange to someone that's never seen it before. They go, "What
Yes.
are you doing? Why haven't you got a floor plan open or something
Yes,
that you're meant to be looking at?
exactly.
Why are you connecting all these blocks together? It doesn't make any sense." And I think my YouTube channel was really motivated by trying not only to help my colleagues understand what I was doing, but laying down the foundation for our industry to go, "Oh, I can actually see what this script does and why we need it." And all my scripts are very practical. They were like real problems I was solving at work. And I had to
Mm-hmm.
go to my boss and ask him for permission. Can I actually do this? Can I have a
Mm-hmm.
channel? Are you okay with that? And he didn't have time for me to train in the company. So I said, well, this is perfect. I can do it in my outside hours and can train
Yeah.
all the people informally.
Yeah.
So it was a win-win. But yeah, that was a big motivation for it. Yeah.
So, how many hours does a person need to put in to get to Aussie BIM Guru level?
Oh gosh, I don't even know how many hours I've spent. I mean, it's got to be in the thousands easily.
Yeah.
And just producing the videos, let alone, is probably
Yeah.
thousands as a.
Do you
But
have like a strict schedule? Do you do like, okay, I have to do like 1 hour every day, or it's just some days
mm,
it's like a stretch and then some other days it's like a few minutes?
not so much these days. I mean, I don't really train in Dynamo
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
Yeah.
I've got to the point now where I'm really comfortable with it. It's more Python and C Sharp these days where I'm really still learning. Python mostly for PyRevit, but
Mm-hmm.
C Sharp both for a Dynamo and a application focus. I try to. I mean, these days I'm lucky to get probably like 2 or 3 hours in a week.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the day, like I would be putting in at least 1 or 2 hours every night,
Mm-hmm.
just learning new things, which I've really for most of my career tried to do,
Mm-hmm.
because there's just so much software to learn. And I
Yeah.
do Grasshopper and Rhino as well, which is like a
Yes.
whole extra
Yes.
skill set on top of that. So, and it's
Agreed.
impossible to learn on the job, in my opinion. I think it's nearly impossible to learn to be a programmer by working in an architectural firm because no one understands what you're doing most of the time. I mean, I'm lucky I work with a big team at the moment. There's about 20, just over 20 people with a principal,
Mm-hmm.
and we're all digitally focused. And I actually work with a company called Architectus just so I can put their name there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been a nice change because billable work is a real challenge.
It
Yeah.
is a real challenge. Again, the landscape has changed from when we started. And for those of you who are just knowing that I exist, I started doing this in 2017 almost because I first was in academia. I was teaching virtual reality, 3D printing sort of things. And then I moved to practice. A lot of people got to know me after my last master, which was the BMA Plus master in Europe, because that's when I really started putting my work out there. But that was by no means me just leaving school, which I'm still dealing with till today. Because apparently, when you go back to school, also fair warning for those planning to go back to do a master's in BIM or study BIM, everyone assumes you're just a student who just graduated. It's really strange, but every firm you go to, they're like, oh, this is our student. And you're like, no, I have many years
Like
of experience.
good as a professor, really.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, but they seem
Yeah.
to just erase everything that happened before. Oh, you just
Mm.
graduated. So you should be very careful about how you communicate that if you ever decide to get formally educated. Which brings me to my next question, Gavin, because I
Mm.
remember you did a video where you were like, "Do people need to do a master's in BIM?" No. Short answer, no.
Yeah.
I remember that video. So, as
Yeah.
someone who did a master in BIM, I guess, do you have any questions for me? Because in your opinion, a master is not really necessary, which to a large
Oh,
extent, I don't
yes and no.
disagree. I don't
Yeah. Yeah.
disagree. I think
Mm.
I already did a video stating why I did mine and the benefits. But
Mhm.
I guess, do you have any sort of curiosity about that?
Yeah, I mean, my position generally, just to establish it first for the viewers, is I don't necessarily say it's not worth it, but it has to be worth it to you. That's the key thing. It has to give you either really strong purpose in the outcomes of your studies, or give you a practical career reality that it will enable. Because I do know a lot of people that have done it and they sort of just did it for the sake of doing it, and they came out of it without really benefiting from it. So I
Yes.
guess I just encourage people to find their why. Why do I want to do this? What
Yeah.
will I get out of it? And if you just want to do it because you're passionate and you love BIM, fantastic. Like our industry needs people to research and test things. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of money. It has to be worth your while as well, right? So I guess I'd be curious to know. I guess what your motivations behind why you took on the studies, and
Mm-hmm.
also I guess how you've sort of found it tied back into your everyday work, and I assume that'll probably encourage other people to consider if they're in a similar position.
I don't know if you've I don't know if you've still applied for jobs or jobs just come to you.
Bit of both.
But I hear people asking a BIM person for a portfolio, like an architecture portfolio.
Yeah,
And
I've
I'm
had to
like,
do that.
what do I put in my portfolio? Like clash detection?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're not really allowed to anyway because it's
Yes.
all intellectual property. It's all confidential. It's like, how can I show you any of this stuff?
It's like
Yeah.
the HR part of BIM hasn't caught up with the reality because there's still the, oh, send us your portfolio. BIM doesn't really have a portfolio. And I do
Um,
understand from like the employer's perspective, you need to see some kind of proof, right?
mm,
For
mm,
BIM, it's really just the resume. Like there's
yeah.
nothing more. And so for me, just having an actual degree was the thing on the resume that would separate me from, oh, I did a Coursera or
Oh yeah.
LinkedIn. Segue to my next question.
Mm,
How important is programming for a BIM professional? Because a lot of people ask, do I need to learn programming? I think I also discussed this with Jacqueline as well. It's like,
mm.
do you need to learn programming to be a BIM manager?
I think it depends on what you want your career to be. There are different flavors of BIM management. Some people can write BIM management plans for a career. Um, Personally, I find that really boring. I just looked at that side of BIM and I said, someone's got to do it, but it doesn't excite me. I prefer to have my hands dirty, solving real problems with real people. And I don't want to devalue what those people do. You do need people to set standards and frameworks and run
Yes.
workflows and processes. It's very important because otherwise we waste a lot of time and money. But I think if you want your career to be dynamic
Mm-hmm.
and flexible, I think programming is one of the best ways to do it because you can access so many different pieces of the industry if you know how to code and modify the way software works. I wouldn't even be excited about Revit anymore if I didn't program for it, probably, because I'd just be like, oh, we got like a tab browser.
Yeah.
Is that worth waiting a whole year?
No.
Probably not.
No.
But show me what's new on the API. I'm excited by that. Yeah, so I think it's not necessarily necessary, but I think if someone's like hands-on in models, like actually, using the software, if you don't know how to program on the software, you're missing out big time. Like you're wasting a lot of your time and probably other people's time too.
Especially in architecture, I can't speak for any other discipline, but I'm pretty sure it's similar. They still really do value the core architectural work a lot more than the BIM work, even
Mm.
though a lot of the production in modern day is with technology, which is where we come in. If you know just as much as the average architect, you most likely find your days spent doing just modeling, which I don't think if you're thinking about this professionally, I don't think that's interesting enough. You
Mm.
could go by way of managing and documentation. That is really a lot of work. And contractually speaking, that is like really high up there in terms of what kind of saves everyone at the end of the day. If there's any issues, those documents are really important. So that could also be something. But if you're not into managing people, writing documents, I think the best way to stand out is by programming, because otherwise you're just like any other architect in the office who probably
Pretty
has
much.
really good Revit skills, and then it's hard to prove why you are in that role, right?
Mm.
So, do you ever use AI to do Dynamo?
Dynamo, no. I did try it. It was disappointing. Generally, it
Very.
wouldn't give me working code. It could solve some little problems, like it built a couple of interfaces for me, which are a bit more complex than the API,
Hmm.
and it more got them right. So it's occasionally given me something I wouldn't have figured out on my own instead of just Googling or looking through Dynamo forums until I find something that works.
Hmm.
But generally, I found it's really just to fill the gaps,
Yeah.
tiny little gaps that are there where it's like, oh, how do I use a match case
Hmm.
function in C sharp, for example, those sorts of syntax things. It's
Hmm.
great for syntax. It's not bad at fixing code. If you've got an error, it can usually find it.
Hmm.
So I do use co-piloting when
Hmm.
I'm learning. That's been quite valuable. I feel like it should just be built into Visual Studio. That's how useful having a co-pilot really is in that
I
environment.
agree.
Yeah, it's good at times, but it definitely, I don't know if it's ever going to be able to write full programs from the ground up, at least not for Revit, because Revit wasn't built to work this way. Like it's not the most logical
Hmm.
API.
Yeah.
There's some strange things in it. You can't get an element's name in IronPython because there's a type error, and
Yeah.
ChatGPT would never understand that. So yeah,
I've
it's a
I,
fun one.
I've come to see that it's somehow very bad for dynamo graphs, just if you want to do graphs. For Python, I
Mm,
haven't done as much, but I find the C sharp output to be almost like good to go in most
mm.
cases. I don't know if that speaks to, again, web scraping. The building coder has a lot of C sharp on
Oh, yeah,
his
yeah.
blog, so maybe
Mm,
that's why it's so good. But
yeah.
I found it to be the same.
I think if you build things in pieces, it sort of works. If you
Yeah,
sort of know how you're putting your application together from the
yeah,
beginning, I think you need to at least be able to write like the pseudocode, like
mm-hmm.
how is my app work?
Yeah,
I don't think ChatGPT and all these other flavors of GPT can
mm-hmm.
can build your full application from nothing. It has to sort of be like, okay, I've solved this bit. Now can you help me with this? And you still need to sort of have a rough understanding of how it's all going to go together.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone I hear who's like AI is the best, it's going to change everything. These people all learn programming traditionally. They already know how to program, so they're fully biased in saying it's easy, it's perfect, it does it. I'm like, no, you're still probably doing a lot of work on the side to make this thing actually work. It's not just you're not just typing something in, pressing run, no
Mm-hmm.
bugs, perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
We have to be honest that it's not an 100% solution. And
yeah,
honestly, if a company had someone run something and copy some code in and hit play, from a security perspective, that's already just like crazy that no one would read the code before they run it, because it could be like a virus for all we know that's going to execute a payload on the computer. Like, I mean, who knows who runs that GPT server?
I
Yeah.
agree, but I also know that we've been actually wasting time on a lot of things that could just be automated.
I think AI is the first like hype wave that's sort of stuck like
Yes.
for a while. Yeah.
Yes, and it's because the use case of ChatGPT was so practical.
Mm.
It was VR, AR. At some point, people were building in the metaverse. Metaverse architect became a thing. Yeah, 3D printing, I think, didn't find its foot in this industry. I think in the manufacturing industry, it's still very much being used. Even like in healthcare, they do. I think they
Yeah.
do use 3D printing a lot. But I think in
Oh yeah.
construction,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a hardware thing, right? I
yeah,
mean, VR, you needed the hardware to run it. You needed to optimize your experiences to run on a headset.
yeah,
3D printing, we've all used 3D printers before. We know how finicky they are.
yeah,
Work, half the time if you're lucky.
yeah,
And you find out the next morning after you've got a client meeting.
yeah.
And
Yes.
metaverse, you need some sort of platform headsets again. So I think the AI, the hardware is managed by someone else. That's
Yes.
the part that makes it
Yes.
easier. You're querying something that you don't actually have to manage in
Yeah.
principle, unless you do a private engine, of course, and run
Yeah.
your own sort of private client. And I think that's one of the big things. It was very accessible.
Also, the people I feel bad for, I don't know if this wave ever hit Australia, but in Nigeria at some point there was this like obsession with rendering.
Uh,
And your
yeah,
rendering skills were what set you apart. I feel really bad for people who spent so much time
yeah,
developing
yeah.
rendering skills, because it's
Big
kind of the
change.
first to go. I think if AI really hits, the fact that you don't need to have a very high quality machine to
Mm.
do a very good render, that just changes so much
Yeah,
from an
yeah.
economic
It sort of
perspective.
lowered the expectations from clients too. They're sort
Yeah,
of like, oh, if you use AI, it's fine. It doesn't
yeah,
have to look 100 perfect.
yeah,
There's a couple of studios still, doing the final CG render that they're not willing to risk AI on, but those firms are all using AI anyway. Like they're smart.
exactly,
They know what they're
exactly.
doing.
Yeah,
But most architecture firms in Australia I know of have either laid off their visualizers, or their visualizers have had to learn this stuff
learn
to
of
make
it. Yeah, to stay relevant.
sure. And if you don't, you just lost your job for good. You have to learn AI if you're in biz. There's
I
no
I
there's no choice. Yeah,
I completely agree. It's non-negotiable at this time.
yeah.
So I made a post not too long ago. I don't know if you saw that. And also, I think I should just go ahead and thank you for never coming at me, as I would say, because I've seen you tackle some people on LinkedIn. I'm like, ooh,
Oh yeah, I'll call people out. Yeah, I always do it with the goal of educating, but also enjoying challenging my own opinions. So
yeah,
sometimes I will comment on things with the hope that they don't agree with me,
yeah,
and I can get a good debate going. And I usually try to keep it fairly civilized. Whereas some
definitely,
people will just say you're an idiot.
yeah,
Like I never say that. Never
yeah,
put down the person. I say I don't agree. Occasionally I'll joke a little bit,
yeah.
maybe put a joking comment on something and be a bit cheeky. But
Do you
yeah,
ever feel it's intimidating? Because I feel like a lot of people take your comments as like, I don't know, like law or something. It's like, ooh, I can't argue with him. He knows what he's saying.
maybe they might be. I hope they're not. If anyone watching is intimidated by me, just drop me a message. I try not to be a scary guy. It's never my goal.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just trying to, yeah, challenge our industry, get people a little bit more passionate, a little bit more not angry about it, but trying to go, okay, yeah, well, let's think about this. Is this really what we want to do? So yeah.
I made a post a while ago about, oh, you can't scale Dynamo, so you should learn C sharp. And
Mm.
I made it, actually, I did not intend for that post to get as popular as it did. I'm going to talk about it in the next video I published.
Yeah.
There were like 47,000 impressions on that post.
Like, yeah.
It just went off. So I was basically
Mhm.
saying that it's hard to scale Dynamo from an organizational standpoint. Like,
It is. Yeah.
yeah.
It
It,
really is. Yeah.
so, and everyone's like, no, that's not true. You can definitely scale Dynamo. You can definitely scale Dynamo. So I wanted to
Mm.
get your opinion, because I didn't say it was impossible. I just said you're better off making an add-in or using PyRevit, but you shouldn't just stop, like you're like Dynamo master and then you just stop there. It's not easy to scale organizationally, those scripts. So what is your
Yeah.
opinion on like how to scale Dynamo?
So I think that the biggest challenge with scaling Dynamo is, do you have enough people to scale it? Because it takes a lot of work to make it work across all versions of Revit all the time. Make sure everyone's got all the dependencies they need on their computer. You really are at the mercy of how well your IT department can support you. How many people are maintaining scripts, reviewing them, testing them. Dynamo has had a lot of challenges with new versions recently. They're not as backwards compatible as they used to be. They're not developing new features back into older builds. So I think just that on its own makes it very difficult to scale Dynamo, because you can't just take one script and run it in any version of Revit and know it's going to work, which for an application is just unacceptable. You can't safely give it to someone, because they might run something and it breaks the whole model. So I think that on its own makes Dynamo very difficult to scale. And I think I did a video on it a little while ago and more or less concluded it's not really a scalable solution if you're working at like a 300 plus person company, unless you have a really dedicated department and you have a lot of training, a lot of social initiatives that make it work that way. Like you almost need every person who uses it to sort of understand Dynamo a little bit. There's applications they don't really need to understand what's going on behind the scenes, because you've already bugged and error tested, and you've put exit conditions in your code and things that Dynamo just can't do. Dynamo has to run the whole script the whole way through. So if it hits a problem halfway, it's going to just spit errors the whole way through the rest of the script. So I think that makes it hard. One thing that I don't always agree on is often people say, just go straight to C#. You may as well. I totally understand why people say it, because you can waste a lot of time in Python if you're not careful. I wasted a bit of time in Python once I got to C# and saw the speed and said, okay, this is obviously a different sort of league that we're playing with. But PyRevit, for example, that I've actually used that at Architectus where I work now, and we've got like hundreds of tools just distributed around the company that are all working, running quite quickly. But that's mainly just because of how great PyRevit is. It's not like Python itself. It's PyRevit doing a lot of the heavy work there. But I think eventually C# should be probably the goal if someone wants to develop add-ins at scale. It just makes sense. It's the closest to the computer. It's the way you're meant to develop in Revit in principle. If you go back 10 years ago, that's the only option you really had. It's the original way to do it. But I can totally understand why people were intimidated by it or find it harder to learn. Like there's less resources out there, I would say, than everything else. And it's definitely not where many people can begin. Like, I don't know how people 20 years ago picked it up. Crazy how they just figured it out. Without API docs. Like amazing. Like no Revit API docs. How did they do it? I live on that website. So I don't think there's anything wrong with what you said. I totally get where you're coming from. Like, don't waste your whole career just using Dynamo. You know, challenge yourself, I guess, is the main thing, right?
On that note, please subscribe to my channel. Don't get stuck on Dynamo. So when you're done with Gavin's channel, just come to mine and then.
I might be on that one day. I don't know, but I am watching your content and you're doing a great job.
Thank you
so
so
I can endorse you as well. I endorse your channel. Anyone watching?
Yay!
This is a yep.
So you heard it here first, and I do make a promise to always not post just for the sake of posting. It might mean you may not get videos from me every week, guys, but if I'm posting a video, it has to be helpful somehow. This is not one of those YouTube niches where I'm expecting 200 million people to be following me. So I think if you're on this channel, you really care about learning. And so I'm going to try to actually teach something useful. Anywho, speaking about YouTube, did you ever expect your channel to be as impactful as it has become?
Definitely not. I thought it was going to be a little hobby that I just did every now and then for fun. And I think it was about a year in, and I think I'd had about 1,000 subscribers, and I went, whoa, like I never thought it would get to this point. What's going on? And then, you know, I think I'm almost at 50 now, and it's crazy. I mean, I was inspired by the Revit kid, who at the time I think had about 30,000 subscribers, and he was my inspiration. And I thought, if I can get there, holy moly, like I don't know how that's going to happen. So never expected it, but I was so surprised by just how many different people around the world it connected me with, like yourself, and even, you know, people like Nicholas and Jeff on YouTube. I've done webinars with them, and it's crazy to think that just that little move to make a channel and start just posting the occasional video did it. And LinkedIn was a big part of that too. I did use LinkedIn to promote my content, and I think that's how it reached a lot more people. But I'm really sort of humbled that I guess people found it useful, and it's helped open doors in my career as well. Like my current role, I wouldn't have without what I did, because I just wouldn't have had the reputation to go with and say, look me up, you know, you can see what I can do here. And they said, oh yeah, all people have watched you before and stuff, you know. So it's just a door opener as well, which I never expected.
As an example, for someone who's thinking, oh, you could just do YouTube full time, I don't think it's enough to sustain you. Definitely not in this niche. For anyone in this particular niche doing YouTube, the financial benefit is not the reason, because I mean, there are benefits that are maybe not tied to YouTube, in terms of like visibility for your career, maybe also negotiating your role or your salary. It helps to have something, but not that YouTube pays for the lifestyle. No, this is all.
It's not stable. It's going down. The money you make from YouTube over the years, it's got less and less. So I mean, I'm happy sharing. I make about probably 250 Australian dollars a month, which is like not even
Not,
like an hour consulting.
yeah.
So, I mean, I consulted for 2 years straight, and nearly all of my clients came to me through YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So it enabled me to live my best life. So I kept doing it because I said, well, they're following me. They're saying, oh, I see you made a video on this. Can you build us an app that does that? I'm like, yeah, of course I can. But now I'm charging my consulting rate now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's where the real money comes
Yeah.
from. And I think every YouTuber out there is generally, maybe not Balkan Architect with the scale that he's working at. He's
Mm-hmm.
obviously drawing a amount of revenue, but he has a platform as well, a course platform, so that
Mm-hmm.
sort of connects to it. But like Nicholas Catellia has BIM Pure, the Revit Kid has BIM After Dark. Like we've all got our side hustles, and YouTube is sort of a way to funnel people to other ways that we can make a
Mm-hmm.
living while helping them in
Yeah.
more dynamic ways. So, and I think that's the key. So YouTube on its own definitely is not like a career, at least in our industry.
Yeah.
It could be. Maybe I'm wrong. Like I'd love for someone
Maybe
to prove me
someone
wrong.
would break the. I mean, Belinda Carr has like 300K, but she does more like, uh,
I
um,
was
yeah, more not just technology, like the whole construction.
gets people angry about shipping containers, doesn't she?
Yes, yes. There was some other.
I love her work. Great
Yes,
videos.
great
But
videos,
yeah, that's
great
where our channel really
production
blew up.
quality. I don't know
Yeah.
how she does it. There's someone else I'm forgetting. I think it's Tina, that's her name, but she also has an architecture channel. Yeah, she also pulls a lot of followers. Maybe those guys,
Yeah, I know who you're
Yeah,
talking about. Yeah, she
yeah.
has fantastic editing as well. Yeah, I follow her. She does really good work. But yeah, they're very dedicated to YouTube as their medium.
Hmm.
My editing is very bad on YouTube. I just stitch it all together at the end and chuck it up. And uh, if people can tell, I'm not, putting
Yeah.
that much time in the editing process.
Learning how to code and then teaching code and then editing is like, that's just too much expectation, guys. I think Eric does a really great job of putting graphics and making his videos
Very good.
exciting. I may get there, but that is not my focus for now. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for agreeing to do this. I
of
hope
course. Yeah,
we get another chance to
and
chat.
I'm sure we'll be in touch. And
Yes.
yeah, we'll see each other on the socials. Yeah.